Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we dig in deep to analyze the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. I'm Andy Nelson from thenextreel.com. We're looking at Jon Favreau's 2008 film Iron Man, and back with me today is Kyle Olson from Legible Scrawl. Hey, Kyle.
Hey, I'm the poor man's Pete.
Yeah, Pete the bum.
Yeah.
I tell ya. Well, we are looking at Iron Man Minute 62 on today's show. The minute starts with Tony disappointing Dummy yet again. And it ends with the reveal of the Mark II suit.
Oh, yeah, this is a good minute.
This is juicy.
Yeah.
It's juicy. This is great. We do, but before we get there, I love this. The beginning of this minute is so funny with him after he kind of successfully lands and he turns to Dummy, who just kind of looks at him expectantly and then,
Such a great thing, because you think after this, it's like his first flight. He's in the feeling really good about himself, and you think it's going to be this big, arms akimbo heroic pose, but no, don't you spray me with that. And
that's great.
And listening to the like we talked about yesterday, there's no official commentary track, but they did record a commentary at the American Cinematique at one point, just to record, and I found a recording of that. That was an improv thing with Robert. Like, he just came up with that. And so he just had that moment with the thing saying, like, don't spray me. So as John was watching this and off camera laughing, he's like making notes to himself, we got to pay that off later.
Yes.
So like basically he built the joke right here. And so like, eventually we'll see the punchline of that in a couple of minutes. But this was all just Robert being Robert. And he does that a lot, and I think it's very easy and natural for him when he's dealing with Dummy and you, and he's dealing with these inanimate objects. Even in the last minute, how he's talking to the camera, and just he's got these just great little lines that they don't amount to much, but even last time, like could be worse, we're fine, and here with that little bit, and then I can fly, just like that fantastic cocky swagger that he's got as he says that. And as we've said, this is something that Jon Favreau is just proven himself to be just I think an expert at is his transitions. And Stanley Kubrick actually said that transitions are one of the most important things for a good filmmaker to tell a successful story, because that's how you're transitioning from shot to shot and from scene to scene and from sequence to sequence. And this has been just nonstop, just very smart ways. And it's obviously not a Stanley Kubrick film, but still you're transitioning from scene to scene in such fluid ways that it propels the story forward in just a way that is exciting and invigorating. And he goes from, I can fly, to you watch all of the armor of the Mark II suit getting put on. Yeah, the design
the mask.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. The mask and the heads-up display that we finally get to see. It's just amazing stuff to watch in this minute.
That is interesting to me because this is something that Matt Fraction, it was one of my favorite comic book writers. He was writing the comic book of Iron Man at the time. They relaunched it, so the movie The Invincible Iron Man. He had a great run on it too. But one of the things in an interview he said, and I tried to track down the exact quote, and I couldn't, because it was actually in a podcast interview that he'd done so many, I couldn't find the exact one. But his basic premise was, we've been writing Iron Man comics for 30 some odd years. And it took Jon Favreau to figure out the helmet. All these years, all these writers, all these designers, all these fantastic artists, and no one thought of the heads-up display until Favreau and his team came along and went, oh, that's how you do it.
Right.
Then you can show him without having to do the Raimi Spider-Man constantly having to pull the mask off.
Exactly.
This way, you see the Iron Man face and you see Tony's face, and you can just cut back and forth between them, and everybody gets it.
It's so smart, and it's actually, there is a fantastic article that I'll have to post in the show notes that interviews 6 of the guys who worked on the heads-up display, just kind of creating all this. It's in the VFXblog.com, and they go through this. It's this history of how they came up with it. The confusion that people that they thought people would have with it, and how they had to try to explain it and everything. And they would do these tests, and people got it so quickly.
Yeah.
And it was great because they realized, oh, we don't have, like, they had an entire scene that they were initially doing with tests to see if people would understand it, because it was like an explanatory scene where Jarvis and Tony would walk through and Jarvis was explaining, well, this is this and this is that, and the audience, the people were just like, we get it, you don't need all this. And so they never ended up going any further with that, which was super smart. But John Nelson, the visual effects supervisor, Wesley Sewell, who is the additional visual effects supervisor, Kent Secchi, who is visualization and the HUD effects supervisor at Pixel Liberation Front.
That's a
Jonathan,
great name.
Right, isn't it? Jonathan Rothbart, the visual effects supervisor at the Orphanage, and Dav Rauch, the HUD design supervisor at the Orphanage, and Kyle McCulloch, the compositing supervisor over at the Orphanage. And reading how these guys kind of figured it out, and what to put in it, and how to kind of make it unfold, it's an amazing story. And John came up with these three things that the HUDs need to do. They need to be driven by Robert's performance. It's all about his face, and anything that he's doing is kind of guiding them. They need to access the Z-axis space, so that you could make it feel like it's bigger in there than it is, just because it creates
really,
that depth.
If you look at it, there's no way.
Oh, yeah. It's all, you're basically in his eyes. It's really what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is that there has to be an alpha event happening in each of the shots. And that's the story point. That is the main thing that you're probably going to be focusing on. So if he says, start tracking the ATC and flights, you're going to see something about the traffic control and the flights all popping up on the screen. That would be the alpha event in that particular shot. And that'll be a really interesting thing to kind of continue discussing over the course of the rest of the film, to really see, kind of start pinpointing, okay, what's the alpha event happening in this HUD? And really start paying attention to that. And when you know that, it becomes really interesting, because you can start seeing these different elements that are within it, and see, what it is they're trying to do, and things that I've never noticed before, because there's so much information in there.
Oh God,
Holy cow.
And that was one of his mandates too, is that everything had to have a function. So every little piece you see, like you're talking about, every little piece had to have an actual thing. It's an altimeter, it's a temperature gauge, like all those things. He didn't want to have anything noisy that's just there to spark and twist and all these things. Everything had to have a function.
Yeah. And that being said, what's interesting is we're looking at the Mark II right now. It'll be a few weeks before we really can start talking about the HUD and the Mark III.
Right.
But it's interesting to see even there how they decided to evolve what Tony was going to have in the Mark II and what he would change once he gets to the Mark III. Which, I mean, that's something I probably never paid attention to before.
No, and just because it goes by so fast. And usually when you're watching that, you're watching Robert. Like, you want to see what's on his face. But they do some great gags in that. I remember one of my favorite things is in Avengers Age of Ultron, when he goes into the Hulkbuster armor, it's a suit in a suit, and you see the entire HUD like slide back as a new one sort of drops in front of it. So like the idea like that he's going that much more, this is the extra data he needs. So he's got like now 4 layers of data in front of him because of this gigantic thing that he's now piloting. Yeah, they have a lot of fun with that. It'd be interesting to like actually go through and does that article talk about like this, what individual pieces are?
It does actually.
Oh,
and
I gotta read that.
There is a really interesting there's a couple links that, I mean, they're on YouTube. They're living out there, so we'll definitely make sure they're in the show notes. But there's a breakdown. They do a breakdown of his first flight, and let's see. Are we going to see this full one in here? I want to make sure
I don't think we get that far, because I think it ends with him just looking out.
Yeah. So we'll save that for the next minute, because it does go through. Like all the different elements that you see in that particular thing, it like analyzes and says, this is this and this is this. So we'll talk about that in the next one.
Yeah, those ILM guys, they're known for hiding stuff on the edges. They're the guys who put a shoe in one of the battles in Star Wars. So.
Right. So it's a fantastic bit of technology, but it's not just about the HUD in this particular moment. I mean, this is really the minute where you get to see, you get to see a lot more of the Iron Man suit than we have. We've seen the Mark I, which is the rough cave-made version. Now you're getting the Mark II, which is still in kind of, I guess you could say it's the testing phase. You can still see the rivets. There's it's not painted. It's kind of that
Bondo
chrome.
Gray.
Yeah, it's the Bondo Gray, the Bondo Gray suit. That's fantastic. I want to see the color-coded closet that he has for all the different ones. But but you get a fantastic moment after he kind of tests his HUD, where you come around the backside as he starts testing. Testing his flaps and everything, and he says, do a check on the control surfaces, and then you come outside of the suit and you start watching as all the different flaps starting down by his feet just start moving and shifting, and his whole suit of armor is basically getting tested here. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. This is one of the great moments of the thing too, where it's the big reveal, because we all know it's coming. We've seen the blocky one and everything. And then just taking the time to just like, all right, I'm going to show you 1,000 moving parts of this thing before I give you the big reveal.
And it's great to see like how it works, because it's like a transformer where you're like, I don't know how these pieces fit in. But right at the beginning of it, you see him in his boots that he's been testing, and you see like this mechanical arms swing down and clamp on the exterior leg pieces, and then you see you see his hand as he's kind of with an electric drill, he's kind of screwing on a little elbow piece or something there.
Yeah, literally screwing himself into the armor.
Right. And I like that even that it's a Stark Industries branded drill that he's using, of course.
He gets them in bulk at discount.
And this is the only time you get to see the inside of the mask, which is so cool, as you get the POV as he's bringing it up to your face. And it's like an inverted Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Is what it looks
that's
like.
True. Yeah. Yeah, because you're right. Because we don't usually get to see that faceplate with all of the probably the diodes or whatever it is that's using to project the impressions either into his eyes or in front of him.
Right.
Because usually when later on in other future movies, when he pops it off, it's usually just a piece of metal.
Right. Or it just it flips up and you don't really get to actually see what's on the underside.
Yeah. So we just get a couple of seconds to see those couple little pieces around the eyes and stuff, what they are.
And you see like the little silver mouth, like with the holes where it provides the oxygen for him while he's in it. It's a really cool look. And then of course the eyes light up. Yeah. They kind of flash and come to life, and that's when you know you're in it. And
There's a couple of great POV shots in Iron Man too, where you get to see like what is it like to be Iron Man. Like there in the cave, there was a big one. We get a big one here, and then in a couple of minutes here, we'll get another really, really important one.
It becomes very big, actually, in Iron Man. You end up seeing quite a few POVs, because especially once he's in the suit, you get quite a number of POVs, because generally it's the HUD view, it's the HUD POV that you're looking at. And in this particular case, you're getting that great POV after he puts it on and it comes to life, as it's like scanning his workshop, and you see like it lighting up like each of the different items around his workshop, and it's almost like it's identifying everything. And then you get the little extra detailed information about each of his cars as it's going down the line and scanning them. And I love the detail how it scans the mirror of the Saline S7 and then down to the engine, and then it pulls up. You can see when it cuts back to him, you can see the little Saline S7 information on the screen in front of him. Like it's just grabbing all this stuff for him. And it's not like he's looking at it all, but it's there in case he wants to look at it.
Right. Yeah. It's just giving him more information along the way. It's processing it, filing it away in case later on he needs or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I love. People, a big thing right now is the virtual reality stuff, but I am over virtual reality. I have no interest in virtual reality at all. augmented reality. Now that's awesome. And that's exactly what this is. AR, I think, is really cool. The adding on of information, like this is like what Google Glass wanted to do and what they're doing with HoloLens, which is so amazing. It's this kind of stuff where it scans the world around you and gives you relevant information, or can put stuff in front of you that nobody else has to see. Yeah. It's I think that's one of the coolest things that the Iron Man armor is that, like, and it's obviously that's Jarvis, Jarvis doing his little bits in the background.
Well, it's interesting because we were talking about how Jarvis kind of disappeared for a while from the construction and the testing. He was there at the very beginning when Tony wanted to get started. But then all of a sudden it was just the dummy and you helping him, which was kind of strange. It's like, it seems like Jarvis should be here. But I think they smartly left Jarvis out of that in order to bring him in for this, because Jarvis is such a key component, such a living component of everything that's going on within the suit. Yeah,
and I think they wanted to show it was Tony that built the armor. Like, they don't want to get into any type of Terminator things where, like, there's a Skynet thing that Jarvis had anything to do with that. We'll get to see killer robots in a couple of movies.
We'll see. Yeah. Wait a few years for that one.
Yeah, exactly. For now, it's just about a guy building the suit, and then he has this AI that will help him, run it.
And even like Jon Favreau, when he was talking to this team who was designing it and building it, they talked about how it was very much a part of this character, and this whole idea that Jarvis was really kind of there in the suit and a part of the suit and a character by being that way was very important. And so that's why it was so important for them and for him to make sure that they found a right way to represent the HUD and by extension, Jarvis.
Have you talked at all about Jon Favreau's first meeting with ILM?
I don't think so.
So there's one of those like apocryphal stories that he's sort of told it a couple of times, so I believe this is what happened. But his first meeting, he walked into Industrial Light and Magic, like the Star Wars wizards, and sat down and sort of dropped the script down and said, "I hate CGI. I just want you guys to know that." And it was like this, whoa. And so he basically was saying, I don't want to, like, all your computer nonsense. Like, I don't want that. Like, I want to build real stuff. Like, because kind of what he did on Zathura, you can see he did as much practical as he did. And that's what he wanted to do with Iron Man. But they sort of, in this conversation as it went on, they like, no, he hates bad CGI. So he's thinking of, I don't even want to call out movies, but he's thinking of these other things that have been there, like, no, that's not what we do. And so over the course, they had this conversation about like the fusing of the two. And so that's one of the things that later on they'll get away from, but there are real Iron Man suits of armor. Like this thing that we see in this minute is mostly CGI, but there are like real suits that they actually built to walk around. If you see the extras on the DVD or on iTunes,
right,
you can see them walking around in the suit. They had full suits they would do. By this point, and as we get to Infinity War, they're gone, man. Like, if he gets a helmet, that's pretty much all Robert has anymore when he's shooting on the set. Right. But at this point, they're still there. And so they were in this transitional thing of like, okay, we're going to have some practical and some CG. Now, I think there was a suit, but every moving part, I believe, is CG.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I haven't seen for sure, but I know there's a lot of the Mark I suit that was real. The Mark II, I mean, I know they do have it. I know they have some elements of it walking around and everything, but I mean, largely there's so much work to go into that to really get it to do what it needs to do. I mean, it just ended up being CG. But yeah, when we're watching all of this stuff as the pieces are getting put in place and everything, I mean, it's largely a kind of a CG frame around everything that's happening here.
Yeah, but still, even after 10 years, it looks great.
It really does.
I mean, there's movies that came out in the last 2 or 3 years that don't look as good as this does. It fits into this world so well.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that is the pairing of finding the right way to blend the CG and what's really there.
Yep.
And I don't know for sure, but my hunch is when we're looking at the kind of the money shots coming around the Mark II, as we're watching all the parts move and flex, I wouldn't be surprised if is a person standing there in a Mark II suit, and all of the moving parts, as you said, are kind of the CG'd elements, but largely what we're looking at is pretty much there.
Yeah.
And it's just a beautiful shot.
It's just a beautiful
shot. You get around
shot,
to the end of this minute, and you finally get that face, and it kind of comes right at you, and you're like, oh, that's it. That's the Iron Man face I've been waiting to look at.
Yeah, I think with any of the, it's right at, like the minute ends just as we're getting up to the face. If any montages of like the best moments of Marvel, like this is always in them.
Oh yeah, it's a fantastic moment. Both the HUD and the kind of the suit flexing and kind of the reveal of the whole thing.
Have you talked about Tom Morello at all?
We did.
Okay.
Yes.
So obviously then when this is going through, that's the amazing guitar lick. That's Tom Morello, like rocking it out as playing the sort of the Iron Man theme. That's not the 60s Iron Man theme, which we've heard numerous times.
Right.
Like this, that's him rocking around the guitar.
Yeah. I didn't know. I knew that he contributed to the score, but I didn't know which guitar licks were his. So it's good to know.
Yeah.
And it's great hearing this theme here. Like this is the Driving with the Top Down track, and it's so perfect. It works so well in sync with what we're looking at, and just the character, everything about it just is really just right on point.
Oh yeah, it's that oh yeah moment as you're watching. Like now you know it's serious business.
It's funny about these HUDs. This is kind of the place where it really kicked off. It turned into something that became a thing. And a lot of other movies started adapting it for their own purposes, movies, TV shows, stories of different sorts. And it's so popular that now, if you want to make your own HUDs, there are all sorts of tutorials online, so you can go create your own.
Oh, wow.
It's become such a thing. And it's amazing that this is kind of where it all kicked off. And it's done so well right out of the gate. And it's funny listening to these guys or reading these guys as they're talking about their experience. They were really flying by the seat of their pants with it, because it's one of those things where you're figuring it out as you go along. But they ended up making it work. And it's like 25 seconds of awesomeness.
Yeah, that was probably like 6 months of their life of like staring at Robert's face and hanging things in front of it and whatever program they were using at the time.
Right.
Maya? I don't know. I'm trying to think what in 2008, what would they have been using? I don't know.
Yeah, right. They were using Nuke was a big program that they were using. And interestingly, I think they did a lot of it in After Effects still, just to kind of create the different pieces and everything. But Nuke, and I'm not familiar with what Nuke is, but it is they were using it. Something with like creating the 3D world, the 3D space. Like they would take Robert Downey Jr.'s face and they would like make it into a face, and they would add like digital eyeballs into it based on his eyeballs, so they knew where it was looking, and they could project the distance and everything, and they could piece everything with that. It's insane, like watching these behind the scenes things for it. It's really, really cool.
It takes a special kind of madness. Like God bless the CG guys, the unsung heroes.
Exactly. The only other thing I was going to say about this before we can talk a lot more about more specifics within the HUD tomorrow, but the John Nelson, the image that initially struck him as inspiration for this was from 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, okay. Yeah, where the images are sort of like playing on his face.
Yeah, it's when Dave is it's in that slit scan sequence toward the end, and you have all those lights flashing around him, and you just see all the lights reflecting on his helmet. It became kind of inspiration for what you could kind of seeing things going on around him. And Minority Report was another a thing that had some inspiration with just the way that some of the effects were working there. But I think largely that 2001 it makes a lot of sense to me. I can totally see that.
Yeah, that's a good pull. Yeah.
Well, I don't have anything else for this minute, but I feel like we can just kind of keep going. But we should save some of it for tomorrow
because we got a big we got some big stuff coming in the next one. So.
Well, Kyle, would you like to tell everybody where they can find you again?
Oh, sure. And my most creative stuff is that I'm a writer. I have a podcast that we do. It's a fiction anthology podcast. It's called The Monday Matinee. You can find us through my other side. Legible Scrawl is sort of when we do our fan stuff, and then Ox and Hair is sort of where we do our independent creative stuff, our original content. So if you want to find on Twitter or Facebook or anything, you can find us through at Ox and Hair, and then or using your podcatchers to find Monday Matinee. If you I'm much more well spoken when I'm writing someone else's dialogue.
Isn't that how it always is, though?
Yeah. I can take it multiple times,
Right. Well, everybody, that is it for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the show for free at marvelmovieminute.com. Join us over in our Discord chat room and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Next Reel. And if you like what we do and you want to support us and get some cool stuff, become a patron over at patreon.com/thenextreel. Until next time, true believers.